Today, I'm sharing 3 unsettling stories about the last day of school and the end of the school year, that pivotal moment when summer officially begins. The sweltering heat, blazing sun, and endless days in t-shirts. But before we dive into those stories, here's a message from our sister channel, Stories Are Magic.
Behind every great dad is a mom Googling how to fix it myself. While dad's Googling how to know if your wife is mad without asking, he's with her, but his heart, 18 holes away. Sun's out, puns out. She's celestial. He's solar-powered sarcasm. Father's Day barbecue, where the meat's burnt and the hope is medium rare.
If dad can't figure it out, we're toast. Literally.
Her phone's like, "Girl, I don't know you." Meanwhile, her friend just came for the chaos. Every thread has a story to tell. Real moods, real laughs, real comfy teas. Tap to shop before your phone gives up too. Stories Are Magic.
If you want to check out Stories Are Magic, the link is in the description. Please like and subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's dive into today's stories. This story was sent to me by a girl named Mia. She's in high school now, but this happened when she was in 8th grade. She made me promise to share it because she thinks other kids need to know. The last day of middle school was supposed to be perfect. I was finally done with 8th grade at Lincoln Middle, and my 2 best friends, Riley and Ava, had convinced their parents to let us celebrate at Ridgeway Mall. We'd been planning this for weeks, shopping, maybe catching a movie, and definitely hitting up the food court for way too much junk food. My mom dropped us off at 2 p.m. with strict instructions to stay together and call her at 6 for pickup. We were practically bouncing with excitement as we walked through those glass doors. Summer vacation stretched ahead of us like an endless possibility, and high school felt both terrifying and thrilling. We spent the first hour at all our usual spots: Hot Topic, Claire's, the little bookstore where Ava liked to browse the manga section. Everything felt normal, perfect even. The mall was busy but not packed, filled with other kids celebrating the end of school and families doing their regular shopping. Around 4 p.m., we decided to grab some food. The food court at Ridgeway was huge, with probably 15 different restaurants arranged in a horseshoe shape around dozens of tables. We got our usual. I ordered orange chicken from Panda Express, Riley got a slice of pizza, and Ava chose a smoothie and pretzel. We found a table near the center of the food court, right under one of those big skylights that made everything feel bright and airy. That's when I first noticed something was off. There was this family sitting at a table about 20 feet away from us. A mom, dad, and what looked like their teenage daughter. Nothing weird about that, except they weren't eating. They weren't talking. They were just sitting there, staring straight ahead, with these blank expressions on their faces. "That's kind of creepy," I whispered to Riley, nodding toward them. She glanced over and shrugged. Maybe they're waiting for someone. But as we ate and chatted about our summer plans, I kept noticing more families like that. A couple with twin boys who couldn't have been older than 10, all sitting in perfect silence. An elderly man and woman at a corner table, their food untouched and growing cold. A group of teenagers who should have been laughing and taking selfies, instead staring into space like mannequins. "Guys," I said, interrupting Ava mid-sentence about some TV show. "Look around. Really look." They did, and I watched their faces change as they realized what I was seeing. At least half the people in the food court were just sitting, not moving, not talking, not eating. Their eyes were open, but it was like nobody was home. "Okay, that's seriously weird," Ava whispered. "Should we tell someone?" Before any of us could answer, a mall security guard walked up to the family I'd first noticed. He said something to them, but they didn't respond. He waved his hand in front of the dad's face. Nothing. The guard looked confused and spoke into his radio. That's when Riley grabbed my arm. "Jenna, look at the mom." I looked and my stomach dropped. The woman was crying, but her face hadn't changed expression at all. Tears were just streaming down her cheeks while she stared straight ahead with that same blank look. "We need to leave," I said, but even as I said it, I realized something that made my blood turn to ice. I couldn't stand up. Not because something was holding me down, but because my body wouldn't obey. I tried to push back from the table, tried to get my legs to work, but it was like the connection between my brain and my muscles had been severed. I can't move, Ava said, her voice barely a whisper. I can't move. Riley was crying now, tears falling just like the woman's had, but her face remained perfectly still. What's happening to us? I tried to scream, tried to call for help, but no sound came out. I could only sit there as more and more people in the food court fell into that same horrible stillness. A toddler in a high chair stopped mid-giggle and went silent. A businessman on his phone froze with the device halfway to his ear. The security guard was talking frantically into his radio now, but I could see it happening to him too. His words got slower, more spaced out, until he was just standing there like a statue. That's when I saw them. They looked like mall employees at first glance. Polo shirts, name tags, that practiced customer service smile. But their eyes were wrong. Too bright, too knowing. And they moved through the food court with a purpose that made my skin crawl. One of them, a woman with short blonde hair and a name tag that read Jennifer, stopped at our table. Her smile was perfectly pleasant and absolutely terrifying. "Hello, girls," she said in a voice like poisoned honey. "Congratulations on finishing middle school. Such an important milestone." I wanted to ask how she knew, wanted to demand what they'd done to us, but I could only sit there and listen. "You're probably wondering what's happening," Jennifer continued, pulling up a chair from an empty table. "Matter-of-factly, it's quite simple really. We need you to stay for a while. All of you." She gestured around the food court, and I realized with growing horror that every single person was now sitting in that terrible stillness. Dozens of people, maybe 100 or more, all trapped in their own bodies. "You see, we feed on moments like this," Jennifer explained, her voice conversational, like she was discussing the weather, transitions, endings and beginnings. The last day of school is particularly nourishing. Another employee, this one a man with kind eyes that made everything worse, approached a family with young children. He placed his hands on the parents' shoulders, and I watched as something seemed to drain out of them. They became even more still, if that was possible, like they were fading away from the inside. "The beautiful thing about shopping malls," Jennifer continued, "is that people come here to transition already, to buy new clothes for new phases of life, to celebrate milestones, to mark time passing. We just help the process along." I felt her cold fingers touch my shoulder, and suddenly I understood. This wasn't the first time. The food court had been feeding for years, maybe decades. All those missing person reports, all those families who came to the mall and were never seen again. They were still here, in a way, trapped in an eternal moment between their old lives and whatever came next. "Don't worry," Jennifer whispered, and I could feel something vital being pulled out of me, like she was siphoning away my very essence. "You won't feel hungry anymore. You won't feel tired. You won't feel anything at all after a while." But then something happened that Jennifer clearly wasn't expecting. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was such a small thing, but it broke through whatever was holding me. For just a second, I could move again. I managed to grab my phone and see the text from my mom, "Running early, be there in 20 minutes. That connection to the outside world, that reminder that someone was coming for us, gave me just enough strength to do something Jennifer definitely wasn't expecting. I bit my own tongue, hard. The pain was sharp and immediate, and suddenly I could move. Not much, but enough. I grabbed Riley's hand and squeezed as hard as I could, trying to share that jolt of sensation. Her eyes widened slightly, and I saw awareness flicker back into them. She grabbed Ava's hand, and like a chain reaction, our friend gasped and blinked. "Run," I whispered. And somehow we managed to stand. Jennifer's pleasant expression never changed, but I heard her make a sound like a hiss. The other employees started moving toward us, but they moved like they were underwater, slow and deliberate. We stumbled through the food court, past all those frozen people. And I've never felt anything as horrible as walking by them and knowing we were leaving them behind. But we couldn't help them. We could barely help ourselves. We made it to the main corridor of the mall, and suddenly we could run properly again. We sprinted toward the exit, past store after store, and I kept expecting to feel those cold fingers on my shoulder again. We burst through the glass doors just as my mom was pulling into the parking lot. We dove into her car, all three of us talking at once, trying to explain what had happened. Mom wanted to call the police, but when we looked back at the mall, everything looked normal. People were walking in and out. Through the windows, we could see the food court full of families eating and talking and laughing. The police did come eventually. They found nothing unusual. The security cameras showed us eating lunch and then leaving normally. No frozen people, no strange employees, nothing. But here's what I know, and what I need you to understand if you're reading this. We never paid for our food that day. When we ran, we left our trays on the table, our meals half finished. But when I checked my bank account later, the charge was there. Panda Express, $8.47, processed at 6:23 p.m., 23 minutes after we'd already left the mall.
And every year since then, on the last day of school, I get a text from an unknown number. It's always the same message. Your table is still waiting. Last month, Ava's little brother started 8th grade. Yesterday, he asked if he could go to Ridgeway Mall with his friends to celebrate finishing middle school. Ava told her parents about what happened to us 3 years ago. They listened politely and said they understood why she was worried, but that trauma can sometimes make us remember things differently than they actually happened. Her brother is going to the mall tomorrow, the last day of school. I've been trying to reach Ava all day, but she's not answering her phone. When I called her house, her mom said Ava had gone to the mall to, quote, face her fears and, quote, prove to herself that it was all in her head. She left 2 hours ago. If anyone reading this lives near Ridgeway Mall, please don't go to the food court tomorrow. And if you see 3 teenage girls sitting at a table, not moving, not eating, just staring ahead with tears streaming down their faces, please don't just walk by. Please try to help them. Some of us are still waiting for someone to care enough to try. I'm 23 now, and I still can't sleep with the windows open. Every time I hear a door creak or footsteps on wooden floors, I'm right back in that beach house, hiding in a closet and trying not to breathe too loud. This happened when I was 17, the summer before senior year, and I've never told the full story to anyone. Not even the cops got all the details. My friend Ethan's family owned this beach house about 3 hours north of where we lived. It was one of those places that's beautiful in the daytime but feels like the edge of the world once the sun goes down. No neighbors for miles, just sand dunes and the sound of waves. Ethan had been talking about taking me and our friend Lena there for the last weekend of junior year. One final hurrah before summer jobs and college prep took over our lives. We drove up on a Friday afternoon in Ethan's beat-up Honda. The house was exactly what you'd expect from a family beach place. Weathered wood siding, a big deck overlooking the water, and that smell of salt air mixed with something musty that never quite goes away in beach houses. We'd been there maybe an hour, just walking along the shoreline and taking pictures, when we saw him. He was sitting on a piece of driftwood about 50 yards down the beach from us. And at first, I didn't think much of it, just another beachgoer. But as we got closer, something felt off. The guy was probably in his 40s with long, greasy hair and clothes that looked like he'd been wearing them for weeks. He was staring at us with this intensity that made my skin crawl. "Hey," he called out when we were about 20 feet away. "You kids need to move along." Ethan stopped walking. "Excuse me? This is my spot," the man said, standing up. He was taller than I'd expected, and there was something in his posture that screamed danger. "Been coming here for years. You're trespassing." "It's a public beach," Lena said, but her voice was shaky. The man took a step toward us. "Not this part. This part's mine." Ethan, being Ethan, tried to defuse the situation. "Look, we're just walking. We're staying at my family's house up there." He pointed toward the beach house.
That's when the man's expression changed. His eyes got this weird, hungry look. "That house, huh?" He was smiling now, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "Nice place. Real nice place." "We should go," I whispered to Ethan. The man heard me. "Yeah, you should go, but don't worry. I know where to find you." We backed away slowly, trying not to run until we were out of sight. When we finally made it back to the house, we were all shaken up. "What a freak," Lena said, but she kept looking over her shoulder toward the beach. "He's probably just some homeless guy," Ethan said. "There's a lot of them around here in the summer." We tried to shake it off. We grilled burgers on the deck, played some card games, talked about our plans for senior year. Normal stuff. But as the sun started setting, I couldn't stop thinking about the way that man had looked at the house. Like he knew something we didn't. That's when Lena noticed the coffee cup. "Did one of you make coffee?" she asked, holding up a mug from the kitchen sink. Ethan and I looked at each other. "We just got here a few hours ago," Ethan said, "and we've all been together the whole time." The mug was still warm. "Maybe your parents left it from last time they were here?" I suggested, but even as I said it, I knew it didn't make sense. Ethan's family hadn't been to the house in over a month. Then Lena pointed to the sliding door that led to the deck. "Wasn't that closed when we came in?" It was wide open now, the curtains moving in the ocean breeze. Ethan frowned. "I thought I closed it." That's when I noticed the sand. Little trails of wet sand on the hardwood floor, leading from the sliding door toward the kitchen, like someone had walked through the house with sandy feet. "Ethan," I said quietly, "we need to check this place out." We went through the house, room by room. Most of it looked normal, but in the master bedroom, the window was open. Ethan swore he'd checked all the windows when we arrived, and they'd all been locked. "Someone's been in here," Lena whispered. Ethan grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen and headed for the deck. "I'm checking under the house." The beach house was built on stilts with a crawl space underneath that was maybe 4 feet high. Ethan crouched down and shined the flashlight under there. Oh shit, he said. Lena and I crouched down beside him. In the beam of the flashlight, we could see a makeshift camp, a sleeping bag, some empty food cans, and a plastic tarp stretched between the support beams. Someone had been living under the house. "We need to call the police," Lena said. Ethan pulled out his phone, but there was barely any signal. He managed to get through to the local police station, and they said they'd send someone out, but it would be at least 2 hours. The nearest patrol car was dealing with an accident on the highway. 2 hours? I said. What are we supposed to do for 2 hours? We could leave, Lena suggested, but Ethan shook his head. If we leave now, whoever this is will just come back. At least if we stay, we can watch the house until the cops get here.
It seemed reasonable at the time. We locked all the doors and windows, turned on every light in the house, and settled in to wait. Ethan found a baseball bat in the closet. Lena had pepper spray on her keychain. I had my phone ready to call 911 if anything happened. For the first hour, nothing did. We played cards, watched TV, tried to act normal. But the whole time, I kept thinking about that man on the beach and the way he'd smiled when Ethan mentioned the house.
Around 11 o'clock, the power went out. The house went completely dark except for the moonlight coming through the windows. Our phones still had battery, but the flashlight apps barely cut through the darkness.
It's probably just a blown fuse,
Ethan whispered, but his voice was shaking. That's when we heard the front door creak open. We all froze. Ethan had locked that door. I'd watched him check it twice. Footsteps on the hardwood floor. Slow, deliberate steps, like someone who knew exactly where they were going.
Closet.
Ethan breathed.
We crept toward the bedroom as quietly as we could. Ethan's parents had this big walk-in closet, and we squeezed inside, pulling the door almost closed but leaving it open just a crack so we could see out. The footsteps were getting closer, and then we heard his voice.
"I know you're in here," the man from the beach called out. His voice echoed through the house. "This is my place. Has been for months." He was in the living room now. Through the crack in the closet door, I could see the beam of a flashlight moving around. "You kids shouldn't have come here," he continued. "But don't worry, I'm not gonna hurt you. Much." Lena was pressed against me, and I could feel her shaking. Ethan was gripping the baseball bat so tight his knuckles were white. The man was moving through the house like he knew every room, every piece of furniture. He wasn't searching randomly. He knew exactly where we were likely to be hiding. "Found some interesting things in your car," he said, and I realized he must have gone through Ethan's Honda while we were inside. Lena Chavez, Ethan Grant, and what's this? Casey Rivera. Pretty names, pretty faces on these driver's licenses. My blood went cold. He knew our names, our addresses. The footsteps stopped right outside the bedroom. "I can smell your fear," he said quietly. "Sweet teenage fear." The closet door started to open.
Ethan burst out swinging the bat. But the man was ready for him. He grabbed Ethan by the shirt and threw him against the wall. Lena screamed and tried to run, but he caught her by the arm. That's when I did something I never thought I was capable of. I grabbed the first thing I could find, a heavy ceramic lamp from the dresser, and smashed it over the man's head. He went down hard, but he wasn't unconscious. Blood was running down his face, and he was looking at me with pure rage. "You little bitch!" he snarled, starting to get up. That's when we heard the sirens. The man heard them too. He looked toward the window, then back at us, and something in his expression changed. Without another word, he ran, just vanished into the darkness like he'd never been there. The police found him 3 days later, living in a tent about 2 miles up the beach. Turns out, he'd been breaking into vacation homes all summer, living underneath them or in crawl spaces when the owners weren't around. Our beach house had been his favorite. He'd been staying there for almost 2 months, coming and going whenever he pleased. He knew our schedules. He knew when Ethan's family usually came up for weekends. He'd been watching us from the moment we arrived. The cops said we were lucky. They found journals in his camp, pages and pages of notes about the families who owned the houses he'd been staying in, what time they went to bed, what cars they drove, where they kept their spare keys, and photos, lots of photos, taken through windows while people were sleeping. We never went back to that beach house. Ethan's family sold it the next month. But sometimes, when I'm lying in bed at night, I think about all those days that man was living underneath us, watching us, learning our habits. And I wonder how many other houses he'd been in, how many other families never knew they had a house guest who came and went in the shadows. How many times had he stood in their bedrooms while they slept, just watching? This happened to my friend Logan during his senior year of high school. He asked me to share his story because he can't bring himself to talk about it anymore. It was the last day of school at Crest Hill High, and Logan couldn't wait to get out. Senior year was finally over, and summer stretched ahead like a promise of freedom. The hallways buzzed with that electric energy you only get on the final day. Lockers slamming, yearbooks being signed, teachers pretending they weren't as excited as the students.
Logan had stayed late to clean out his locker and say goodbye to his favorite teacher, Miss Foster. By the time he finished, the building was nearly empty. The custodial staff had already started their deep cleaning, and the familiar sounds of teenage chaos had been replaced by an eerie quiet.
He was walking toward the main exit when he heard something that made him stop cold. It was the sound of children laughing. But not the kind of laughter you'd expect. This was different. Hollow, wrong. The laughter was coming from the elementary wing, which had been closed for renovations all year. Logan knew this because his little sister had been bused to another school since September. The entire section was supposed to be gutted and rebuilt over the summer. Logan told himself to just leave, walk out those doors and never look back. But curiosity got the better of him, the way it always does in these situations. He followed the sound down the darkened hallway, his footsteps echoing off the walls. Emergency lighting cast long, twisted shadows that seemed to move on their own. The laughter grew louder as he approached the elementary wing, but now he could hear something else mixed in. Crying. Soft, desperate sobbing. The entrance to the elementary section was blocked by plastic sheeting and caution tape, but there was a gap just wide enough for someone to slip through. Logan pushed aside the plastic and stepped into what should have been a construction zone. Instead, he found himself in a perfectly preserved 1970s classroom. The walls were that institutional green color schools used to love, and ancient desks sat in perfect rows. A chalkboard at the front of the room had writing on it in faded white chalk. "Welcome to your last day." But it was the children that made Logan's blood turn to ice. There were maybe 20 of them, all sitting at those old desks with their hands folded neatly. They wore clothes from decades past, the boys in pressed slacks and sweater vests, the girls in jumpers and Mary Jane shoes. Their faces were pale, almost translucent, and when they turned to look at Logan, their eyes were completely black. "You're late for class," said a woman's voice from the front of the room. Logan spun around to see a teacher standing by the chalkboard. She was elderly, with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and wearing a dress that must have been fashionable 50 years ago. Her smile was too wide, showing too many teeth. I'm sorry," Logan stammered. "I was just leaving. I shouldn't be here." "Nonsense," the teacher said, her voice sickeningly sweet. "It's the last day of school. Everyone should be here for the last day."
That's when Logan noticed something that made his stomach lurch.
One of the desks in the back row had his name carved into it. Not just Logan, his full name, Logan Anthony Reyes, carved deep into the wood in the same handwriting as the message on the chalkboard. "Take your seat, Logan," the teacher commanded, and her voice echoed with an authority that seemed to bypass his brain and speak directly to his muscles. Logan found himself walking toward that desk against his will. The pale children watched him with those horrible black eyes, some still giggling that empty laugh, others crying silent tears that left no tracks on their cheeks. As he got closer to the desk, Logan could see more details carved into the wood. Dates, names, class of 1976, Maria Black, forever young, Eli Turner, see you soon. That last one stopped him cold. Eli Turner had been a kid in Logan's sister's class who'd gone missing 3 years ago. They'd found his backpack in the woods behind the school, but never found Eli. Logan realized with growing horror that all the names carved into the desk were children who had disappeared from Crest Hill over the decades, and now his name was there too, carved in the same precise script. "Sit down, Logan," the teacher repeated, and this time her voice carried the weight of decades. "It's time for your final lesson."
Logan tried to run, but his legs wouldn't obey. The pale children began to laugh again, that horrible hollow sound, and he could see their mouths opening wider than humanly possible, revealing rows of sharp, yellowed teeth.
He was almost to the desk when the sound of the school's fire alarm pierced the air. The spell broke instantly, and Logan found he could move again. He bolted for the door as the teacher shrieked behind him, a sound like nails on a chalkboard mixed with the cry of a dying animal. Logan burst through the plastic sheeting and ran down the hallway as fast as he could. Behind him, he could hear the teacher's voice echoing through the empty school. "You can't leave, Logan. No one leaves on the last day." He made it to the main entrance just as the fire department was arriving. Apparently, someone had pulled the alarm, though later nobody could figure out who. The building was supposed to be empty, except for Logan. The firefighters searched the entire school, including the elementary wing. They found nothing but construction equipment and plastic sheeting. No classroom, no desks, no teacher. When Logan tried to explain what he'd seen, they looked at him like he was having some kind of breakdown. But here's the thing that still keeps Logan awake at night. The next morning, the local newspaper ran a story about the renovation of the elementary wing. According to the article, they'd found something interesting when they started tearing down the old walls.
They discovered a classroom that had been sealed up since 1976 following a tragic incident where an entire class had been killed in a fire on the last day of school. 23 children and their teacher, Ms. Evelyn Blackwood, had died when faulty wiring caused a blaze that spread too quickly for anyone to escape. The newspaper included a class photo from that year. Logan recognized every face, the pale children who had stared at him with those black, hollow eyes. And standing behind them, her hand resting on a young boy's shoulder, was the teacher with the too wide smile. The boy she was touching was Eli Turner. In the photo, he looked exactly the same as he had the day he disappeared.
Logan never went back to Crest Hill High, not even for graduation. He got his diploma mailed to him and moved 3 states away for college. But every year, on the last day of school, no matter where he is, he gets the same text message from an unknown number. "Welcome to your last day." He's never replied, and he's never figured out how to block the number, because it changes every time. But the message is always the same, always sent at exactly 3:15 p.m., the time the final bell rings at Crest Hill High. Last year, Logan's little sister started her senior year. She texted him yesterday, excited about her last day of school tomorrow. Logan tried calling her, tried warning her to leave the building the moment that final bell rings. But she didn't answer. And when he tried calling the school, they told him something that made his blood run cold. They said Nina Reyes wasn't enrolled there. According to their records, no one by that name had ever attended Crest Hill High. But Logan knows she's there. Just like he knows that tomorrow at 3:15 p.m., he's going to get 2 text messages instead of 1. If anyone reading this knows someone at Crest Hill High, please make sure they leave the building the moment school ends. Don't let them stay late. Don't let them go back for anything they forgot. Because some classes never really end. This happened to me about 5 years ago, when I was in 8th grade. I'm 20 now, and I still can't look at photo booth pictures without getting this sick feeling in my stomach. But I need to tell someone about this, because I've never been able to make sense of what happened that day. It was the last day of school before summer break.
Me, Eli, and Noah had been planning this for weeks. We were going to celebrate by catching the new Marvel movie at Northgate Mall, and then just hanging out until our parents picked us up. Nothing crazy, just 3 friends enjoying freedom. The movie was decent, nothing special. When we got out around 4 p.m., the mall was pretty busy with other kids who had the same idea as us. We wandered around for a while, hitting up Game Galaxy, grabbing some food court pizza, just killing time. That's when Noah spotted it. "Dude, check that out," he said, pointing toward the far end of the mall where they were doing construction. Past the caution tape and plastic sheeting, tucked into what used to be a store entrance, was this old photo booth. The kind you don't really see anymore. Red curtain, bench inside, the whole retro setup. "How is that thing even still plugged in?" Eli asked. He was always the practical one. I shrugged. "Only one way to find out." We ducked under the caution tape. I know, we shouldn't have. But we were 13 and it was the last day of school. The construction area was empty and the photo booth was just sitting there like it was waiting for us. Noah went first, pumping quarters into the machine. It wheezed to life with this mechanical grinding sound, and the screen lit up with instructions in that old green text. He squeezed into the booth and started making faces at the camera. 4 flashes, and then the machine started printing. The strip that came out looked normal. Just Noah being Noah, making devil horns and sticking his tongue out. "My turn," Eli said, sliding in next to Noah. They barely fit together on that tiny bench, but they managed. 4 more flashes. When their strip printed, everything looked fine. Eli doing bunny ears behind Noah's head, both of them laughing. Then it was my turn to join them. This is where it gets weird. I squeezed in on Eli's left side. We were packed in there like sardines, but we were laughing about it. I remember very clearly, Noah on the right, Eli in the middle, me on the left. We did our poses. The camera flashed 4 times, and we climbed out to wait for the strip to print. When it came out, we all went quiet. There were 4 people in the photos. In every single shot, there was someone sitting to my left. A 4th person pressed up against the side of the booth, like they'd been squeezed in with us. But here's the thing. I was against the wall. There was no room for anyone else. The person looked like a kid, maybe our age, but their face was wrong somehow. Blurry, like they'd moved during each flash, but moved in the exact same way every time. And they were pale, really pale. "What the hell?" Eli whispered. Noah grabbed the strip from my hands, studying it closer. "This has to be some kind of glitch with the camera, right? Like double exposure or something." But I knew it wasn't a glitch, because looking at those photos, I could remember feeling crowded in that booth. More crowded than I should have been with just the 3 of us. "Let's do it again," I said. I don't know why. Maybe I thought it would prove it was just a camera malfunction. We fed more quarters into the machine. Same positions. Noah right, Eli middle, me left. 4 flashes. This time, when the strip came out, Eli wasn't in any of the photos. It was just me, Noah, and that pale, blurry 4th person. Eli was completely gone, even though he'd been sitting right there between us the whole time. We could see the bench was compressed, like someone was sitting in the middle. But Eli just wasn't there. Eli was staring at the strip with this look on his face I'd never seen before. "Where am I?" he kept saying. "Where am I?" I was right there. Noah was backing away from the photo booth. "We need to leave, right now." But I couldn't stop staring at that fourth person in the photos. The more I looked, the more I could almost make out their features. They looked familiar, but in a way that made my skin crawl. "One more," I said. "Are you insane?" Eli grabbed my arm. "We're leaving." But I was already feeding quarters into the machine. I don't know what came over me. It was like I had to know what would happen next. This time, I got in the booth alone. 4 flashes. When the strip printed, there were still 2 people in the photos. Me and that pale, blurry person sitting right next to me. But now, I could see their face clearly. It was me. Not exactly me, but close enough. Like looking at myself in a funhouse mirror, everything just slightly wrong. The eyes were too wide, the smile too broad, the skin too white. I dropped the photo strip and ran. Noah and Eli were already halfway across the mall, and I caught up with them at the exit. We didn't talk about it on the ride home. We didn't talk about it the next day or the next week. But about a month later, Eli called me. "I found something," he said. His voice sounded shaky. "I was going through old photos from middle school, and I found our 6th grade class picture. You need to see this." He came over that afternoon with the yearbook. We flipped to the class photo, and he pointed to the back row. "Do you see it?" I looked where he was pointing, and my blood went cold. There, standing behind our class, partially hidden by the taller kids, was that same pale, blurry figure from the photo booth. It was barely visible, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it, but it was definitely there. "How long do you think it's been following us?" Eli asked. I didn't have an answer then, and I don't have one now. All I know is that I've been going through old photos ever since. Birthday parties, family vacations, school events, and I keep finding it. Always in the background, always just out of focus, but always there. The photo booth was gone the next time we went to Northgate Mall. The construction crew said they'd never seen one there. But sometimes, when I'm getting my picture taken, I feel that same crowded sensation I felt in the booth that day. Like there's someone standing just outside the frame, waiting to be noticed.